G'day, I'm Scott Sanders. Welcome to the Reach Australia podcast. Reach Australia has a vision to see thousands of healthy, evangelistic, multiplying churches across the country. And we're pushing in this episode into apprenticeships. And today I've got Rhett Harris from EV Church joining us to talk about this really important topic. Why is it important? Well, we've already kind of pushed into sort of the why and the what of ministry apprenticeships. But in this episode today, I want to hear what Rhett's been doing at EV Church, particularly, I guess, breaking a little bit of the apprenticeship model of sort of 2 years, adding that extra year, but also getting under the hood of what they're doing at EV Church to understand how that can be applied to other contexts around Australia. Also, Rhett's now working with the Reach Australia Network part-time in a leadership pipeline consultant role, particularly working on a really important project with large churches across the network and a number of other churches as well, to actually identify what's currently happening, what are we doing well, what can we do better, so that we can share those network learnings across the network. Rhett, it's great to have you on the Reach Australia podcast.
It's great to be here, Scott.
Now, can you tell us about your experience of an apprenticeship?
Back in 1994, a while ago now, at St Paul's Carlingford, they'd had a long history of apprenticeships, people coming on. Bruce Hall's like, can you come on now? Anyway, I was keen to do ministry, and the task was fix the youth ministry, give it a makeover. And it turned out a leader, Andrew Reid, had gone to Perth, so the first bit was actually trying to do some stuff at Macquarie University ministry with my coach, Andrew Graham. Then we flipped back to youth ministry. But the great thing about it was essentially I was doing all the key things you need to be doing. So it's Bible, prayer and people, but particularly leadership. How do we make this youth ministry that they'd given resources to the evening church? We've got this youth ministry is kind of on the down. How do we fix it? So all the kind of key things you got to do in leadership was, there you go, I was having a chance to have a crack.
Bible, people, prayer.
Yep.
And interestingly, you talked about actually being thrown in the deep end, starting something new. So we've caught up with Ben Farlett, National Director of MTS, and he sort of sees three things. You want to do something that you're already doing, so you can strengthen, you can grow it. You want to start something new, and you want to be thrown into something that you're not that great at, that you can actually get some experience at.
Well, I would have done all those. Yeah. So I had been doing the youth ministry, but I was now running it all, and we had to do a serious makeover.
And you said it was a place that had already done or had a history of MTSs. Did that make it easier to sort of make the decision to jump in and say, yep, I want to do this?
Yeah, I think so. I'd seen numbers of godly men and women go before me. It was, at that time, it was just one at a time. It would actually expand out significantly after my time. Carlo had a DNA and a value on apprenticeships and raising people up, and so that was right. And it was part of a whole kingdom mindset. I think it was part of the place where you want to use your life for the sake of Jesus.
So there was that culture already that was existing there of
right.
People encouraging them to go into full-time ministry, but also encouraging them to sort of check things out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, you said later it built momentum. So I've been to the offices. If you go into the Carlingford offices now, you walk in, you actually see these photos of apprentices from the past. You can see that's a key culture piece, having photos on the wall. And I just noted the other day that there was one that had 12 apprentices. So obviously first and second year, sort of 2 years of apprentices there, but they had a big training machine, obviously. Yeah,
and it built momentum, that's exactly right. And I think what I would say, and where I'll go, is I think MTS or apprenticeships done rightly are an output you're wanting to see if a ministry is working well, but they're also an input in the sense that they're building the very things you want to see, because they'll be building teams, raising up leaders. Yeah, so both are happening. So you want them on board. They're setting DNA, and also, but they're the fruit of everything you're trying to create. Great,
that's really helpful. Now, one of the things you've been working on recently at EV Church is moving the sort of traditional apprenticeship program of 2 years to a 3-year program.
Yeah.
What's been the cause of that? Why the change?
Well, the great thing was we were expanding our MTS program, our apprenticeships. The challenge with that, though, is you're then seeing the best of your leaders constantly leaving you, and that then puts a drain on the local church. And everything rises and falls on leadership, so you actually do have to watch that kind of pipeline and what it's doing to the local church. I do think it's a bit different to a university ministry, which has that constant sort of turnover. So particularly you're losing an apprentice right when they're really good. How do I put that? They're being fruit.
Now, isn't that really what the apprenticeship is about?
Of course,
the apprenticeship is primarily about actually giving people a taste, an opportunity to to do ministry, to see if this is what they ought to be doing for
Absolutely.
the rest of their life. But you've also got to weigh that up with the resource constraints of the local church.
Yeah, well, you want to make sure that the local church stays healthy so that it can continue to do that very thing, right? It's kind of, the metaphor's a bit like you want the goose to be able to keep laying the eggs, right? And if you sort of strangle the goose, it just doesn't go that well. So Andrew Hurd particularly was saying, well, look, if we could get our apprentices studying at college over that time, so they do first year college part-time over 3 years, they'd be there for an extra year, which is just a little sort of a tweak, a bit longer for the local church. But it doesn't add any extra time to the whole training length of time for an apprentice getting through, MTS and then say through.
So in terms of
college.
sort of 2 plus 3, 4 years at Bible college,
That's right.
There's no additional time.
That's right.
But some would argue that's not purely then a training apprentice.
They can argue that.
You're actually getting them to start their theological education whilst they're still in church, and really what they want to be doing is the hands-on practical stuff, and now you're putting them in a classroom. Yeah,
I think it's fair enough that we have this. We do argy-bargy over that. And there are pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to deny that. And part depends on the person, which way that. But there are a lot of strength in this system too. We still get a cohort. They're still working together. They'll still join a cohort in second year at college. Our guys, they go down on Tuesdays, so they're down there. They're seeing it all. So, but yeah, we have that debate.
So when they're doing this, college experience as well, what does it actually look like from a trainer perspective? You're still meeting up with them one-on-one, working with them through what they're doing in terms of ministry, and also growing in their, character, their convictions, their competency.
Everything else still stays the same. We have a training ecosystem, so we have a coach, but they also have kind of managers where they're working in ministries with them. So they have quite a number of senior pastors who are inputting into them. So all the classic 3 C's of an apprenticeship are still there and active. They're still doing the ministries, and we're training them in leadership. So they're actually leading significantly, or as you said earlier, building new things, that kind of stuff as well.
And so, what if the apprentice at the end of third year says, "This is not for me. I want to go back to the workforce." Pros, cons of them having completed first year of Bible college.
Oh well, the pro is they get, I think, a diploma in ministry. Mm-hmm. So in fact, obviously we've got a bigger MTS program now, and so particularly for say a number of the women, that's a great outcome. They leave the diploma, they may stay on staff either part-time, full-time, all different combinations, and then I've gone around the block enough times to see, then they're getting married, then they want to have so they'll be in ministry for a number of years, and then they'll change their ministry as they have children. So it works really well for them. But even for some of the guys, it doesn't hurt to have a diploma in ministry, right?
No, it agrees. I was just trying to work on the con. You're struggling to find a con there, aren't you?
Well,
that was a challenge. Yeah, they've done a year at Bible college. What a waste of time. No, not a waste of time. In fact, would it be great if
they're set up. And that's the reality, is those who've done apprenticeships with us, who don't go on to full-time vocational ministry, I still see them active in church life. So, yeah,
you're struggling to find the cons.
I don't have a con, right? I mean, well, the challenge you've got is you've just got theological studies and ministry at the same time. Yep. But at one level, you're always wrestling with that.
And the big pro of the 3 is you've actually got people who are able to exercise significant leadership.
Absolutely.
And move from being that, leading yourself to leading leaders to being able to lead a significant area or responsibility over a congregation or over the whole church.
Yep.
Great. Now, often people's assumption about a ministry apprenticeship is that it's for the young person, it's for the sort of person in their 20s who's still working stuff out. Have you done any apprenticeships with the older person, so the half-time person? Have you started to explore at EV Church? What might it look like to have someone who's in the back half of their career and they're thinking, actually, I want to do something different with my life, and I want to pursue full-time gospel ministry.
Yeah, we haven't. We'd like to go there. We aren't there yet. We have a thing for people kind of heading to retirement, kind of called best years. That's separate again.
Yep.
But what we are trying to do is expand it out a bit. But they're still in their 20s, but they are now married with children, and so we've got a program where they can come on and do that. I think the challenge you've got is if you have a very narrow window where people typically do an apprenticeship, and then if they miss that, there's a chance in which I've missed that chance, I can't do it. So we are trying to expand that, but we're not into people in their 30s and 40s yet. We haven't got there. But we do have a number of apprentices married with children.
And so would you still be encouraging that person to do an apprenticeship? You know, why wouldn't you just encourage them to head straight to college?
Well, you're back into why do an apprenticeship, and the value of an apprenticeship is, you get to make all these mistakes and all this learning with L plates on, yep. And you'll fast track your learning in a really good environment in a healthy ecosystem where you'll learn that stuff. Or you can go to college, learn theology, and then often get out without L plates and make some significant mistakes that could actually hamper you for years and put you back for years. So I think you're better off
making those mistakes early.
Yeah, make the mistakes early.
When people's expectation is, hey, you're able to make mistakes.
Yeah, within a support structure, right? All the scaffoldings around you to do that.
So, Rhett, can you just flesh out a little bit more the Best Years program? How is that different from your traditional apprenticeship?
Yeah, well, it's got some core components in there in the sense that there's some content, theological content, and they meet in a group, and it's shared relationships. So you've got a cohort, all the classic things. But what we're talking about is we've got an early retiree, a godly man who gathers a bunch of people who is there heading into retirement or thinking about retirement or the best years, the later years, and they do some theological content about how should you spend your life, the nature of gospel work, all sorts, being involved with these things together as a group, as a cohort. They also do some relational time, so it is to just hang out.
Yep.
And then at the end, of course, the group we've just had have been away for a weekend. Then they'll ask the question, well, what ministries could I do? And then they will be on board into different ministries, but a whole range of ministries that they pick up.
That's really helpful to hear a little bit more about this. Obviously, there's more going on in the sort of larger, wider ecosystem of EV Church. You're not only doing apprenticeships, but you think about the latter years. You've also got Generate program for people who want to sort of dig deeper into things. You've got other nights where people can go deeper into theological issues. But importantly, you've got this big training system that is actually helping people get into ministry and ministry teams and be developed and grow across all of church life. And that's really the major part of what you're doing in the sort of ministry space at EV. Absolutely,
yep. We want to mobilise as many people for kingdom work according to their gifts and see them placed well for that. So yes, into teams, into layers of leadership, and mobilise and that all changes over people's sort of journey, like situation in life as they're young or older, all that kind of stuff.
So you need flexible
Absolutely.
Options for training and also flexible options for people to sort of come in and come out and realise this is just life. Now, we're going to hear from someone from EV Church about their experience of an apprenticeship. Let's take a listen.
But ever since the apostles, it's been appropriate for some of his people to be set aside to do that work full time. The wonderful thing is that God does this work through us, through his people. He's given us his word. He's given us one another. He's given us prayer. And so we together can be serving one another, bringing the word to bear in each other's lives. And it's good for some to be set aside to do that full time and to help us do that task. And so one of the ways we try and get that happening more and more is through MTS, a ministry training strategy. And so MTS is a 3-year apprenticeship with us, where for those 3 years, these guys come along onto staff with us, be invested in, trained, coached by our pastors here. We give them significant kind of ministry among us to be involved in, to serve in, to learn to lead in. As well as there's also a theological study component where over the 3 years they'll be chipping away at a diploma of theology either through Moore Theological College or SMBC. And so it's a big undertaking. It's a wonderful thing for them to be doing and an opportunity to give full-time ministry a crack and see if it's something they should keep pursuing on into the future. And so, yeah, it's my great privilege and pleasure to introduce these guys.
I'm Krista. I'm married to Toby. We've been married for about 3.5 years. During the week, I work as an occupational therapist, so working with people with disabilities and older adults and veterans and helping them be independent at home. And then on Friday nights, I help out with youth. I lead Year 11 girls, and then I also help out with growth group. I'm just excited to be freed up to do ministry work full time. I really love being an OT and working in my job during the week, but I think I'm really excited to be able to share with people things that last into eternity and things that matter. So I'm really excited to be able to do that full time. I'm excited to just be grown in my character and convictions, and I think that will be really helpful for whatever I end up going into later on, whether that's full-time ministry or something else. Yeah.
But it is a cost for you. You love your work now. It's not an easy thing to give up.
Yeah. I really do love my job now and working with people, but I think, the gospel's worth it, and I think, I'm just really excited to talk with people about things that last. Like, I love helping people be independent at home, but I really want to share with them about Jesus, because that's what really matters.
Well, it's great to hear that story from EV Church. Always enjoyable to hear what God is doing in the lives of people in churches across the network. Rhett, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with Reach Australia in the world of apprenticeships?
Particularly in the world of apprenticeships, there's probably two big additions I'd love to see happen. The first is with reference to leadership training, and the second is how the apprenticeship sits within a broader leadership development framework.
Okay, so push into the leadership training piece.
Yeah, so leadership training, we absolutely need godly leaders, right? The 3 C's: Christian character, Christian convictions, Christian competence. But it's not enough. We actually have to have leaders. So for leading the church, they need to be able to lead themselves, they need to be able to lead others, they need to be able to lead leaders, and ideally eventually lead organisations. And so the main thing we've added into the EV curriculum over the last 10, 12 years is that we've overlaid so that they're learning to lead those different levels of leadership. And I'm convinced it bears much fruit.
So it's an intentional process to develop them as leaders of leaders, and then leaders of a ministry department area, and then give them the basis or a framework to start thinking about what will it look like for me, what changes do I need to make if I want to actually lead church as organisation.
Yeah, that's right. So so that they are aware of the different layers or levels and the changes they need to make as they make each of those. That takes time, but having those. So what we do know is that the way a minister will practice the rest of their life is largely determined by the time they finish their apprenticeship. So if we can get that kind of leadership kind of piece in there while they're doing the apprenticeship, I think they're well set up for the rest of their life.
So that's really helpful. That's why you see this as being critically important.
Absolutely.
How you've been trained in this phase of ministry life, what you do is really what you're going to actually continue to do in your ministry life. Yeah.
Now, obviously, foundational. It's still godliness, discipleship, Bible. As I said, Bible, prayer, people. But we need church leaders, which means, they need to be aware they're going to get out there leading congregations or ministries or whatever it is, missionaries, organisations. So leadership's going to be a key part of it as well.
So what work are you doing currently then to actually help get that DNA piece into potential apprentices and current apprentices around the place?
Well, I'm concerned, this is where it links probably the second thing. I think the apprenticeship sits within a broader leadership development framework, which is where you actually, or you might call it a leadership pipeline. So where we see from people serving mobilised from a young age to serve in, say, ministry teams, and then in time to be actually able to lead those teams or those small groups or growth groups, and even become leaders of those teams or growth groups, so that this kind of whole ecosystem, what we talked about before, actually is the very thing that is raising up leaders. And so the apprentices actually are the fruit, if you like, of such a training ecosystem, but also then they're also inputs into that training system, where they're also then in time when they come on, raising up teams, recruiting for the teams, running healthy teams, growing ministries, and leading through leaders. Yeah. So for me, the apprenticeship is the fruit of a healthy training ecosystem, and also the thing that actually grows healthy. So it's a pipeline in a way.
So potentially leaders that are listening to this and thinking, I just want to get that 1 or 2 apprentices I actually want to start happening.
Yeah.
Actually, their first sort of starting point needs to be actually back into the larger ecosystem in church life to see, well, what are you actually doing to see layers of leadership being raised up across all of church life?
Yeah.
If that's starting to be healthy, then the fruit of that will be people actually putting their hands up and saying, hey, I want to do this. Now, that's where I think it's helpful to listen to episodes 1 and 2 of this podcast series if you haven't, where actually you see some of the key building blocks that MTS are actually trying to get out there in terms of a recruiting calendar during the course of the year, and also some key aspects that you need in terms of seeing an MTS apprenticeship program happen in your church.
Yeah, that's right. But the thing is, it's both and together, right? So you may not have this ecosystem trait set up, but if you find yourself an apprentice, well, one thing
just tap them on the shoulder, get them started.
You get them started, and with them seek to build that thing.
Yep.
Because as they build teams, they will actually be creating this ecosystem.
Yep.
That's the thing.
Yeah, you'll have that
so
DNA.
So it's both and.
Now, the vision of Reach Australia is to see thousands of healthy, evangelistic, multiplying churches. Often, what we say to our planting churches is they actually want to plant pregnant. You want to plant with a ministry apprentice. If you can build someone along with you, that's not only great for their training, they get a chance to actually see and experience a church plant from the ground up, but it's also great for you to have that DNA kind of implanted in the culture and the life of the church from the start. And it's just so much more enjoyable planting in a team and not planting by yourself. As important as it is to have that story of you in the garage with your dog and your wife, it's so much better to have that with someone else. So we're going to hear a story from the recent national conference. We're going to hear from Laneway Church. Josh Allen talk about just that.
Now, Josh, tell us, you began as a church plant. How does the residency with Quan coming on board with a view to possibly do some planting and learning from you guys, how does that fit in with what you're trying to do at Laneway?
Yeah, well, when we initially planned to plant, we were never planning to plant just one church. We thought, surely, we'll plant again in 5 years. That won't be very hard. 5 years in, we're nowhere near that. Like, we're a church of 80 to 90 people. But we've always set aside money towards a future plant. We've continued to pray for planting. It's in our plans for the next 5 years to work out how we would do that. But Derek connected the two of us with Quan's desire to plant, our heart to see planting happen to reach the West. And so what we were able to do, being alongside our brother, is to say, well, we're really keen to be able to train you, help you in whatever way we can, so that you can plant as well as you can. We entered that with quite an open sort of let's work it out as we go. But at the very least, we're committed to working and helping Quan. And so he's a church leading resident. He's a really gifted guy. He's theologically trained. He's been a pastor already in a church. There's so many things he's seen and experienced that he's so sharp on. Being in our church, we're a slightly different context and culture from our training experiences and how we run ministries and things. And so there's things there we can help Quan with. And he's already speaking into our church's life brilliantly. And it's been a joy. We've seen people coming to church and evangelistic things too, just because he's connected, he's local, he's a passionate evangelist. Yeah.
So it's been a mutual partnership. Quan has blessed you guys, and you've been able to invest in Quan. Quan, tell us, how's that been going? Because it's only been about 6 months. You kind of arrived at Laneway since December. What sort of stuff have you been getting out of the residency so far, and with a view to possibly in 2 years' time? Yeah, where do you see it heading?
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting story because, going in, being given an area of ministry, the membership area to lead, but I don't really know many people besides Josh and Sarah and the staff team. So having to learn what it looks like on my feet, thinking through, learning this whole ecosystem thing, is it effective? I think it is, and I need to learn to be convinced that it is in order to really lead well. So there's all of that happening. And also the big thing is I know and see Vietnamese second-gen folks who loves Jesus, and they want to get into ministry, but I don't know how. They don't know what that looks like. How can they be supported? And when you talk about ministry, there's so many areas for that to take place. So I really long to see that happening. People be raised up Yeah, and so learning what it looks like to build leaders. How can I help people along the pathway, raising them up as leaders and doing ministry well, and things like MTS come into the place, that kind of thing. So all of these things. I'm name dropping a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so in a sense, this is a bit of a pilot. Like, we've heard about different models of church planting and that vision of seeing 200 churches evangelized into existence over the next 10 years. And so I guess probably, we think, okay, you need to be at a certain size in order to, give birth as a mother-daughter type of church plant. But this is a different model that we're piloting here, with Kwan sort of coming in, seeing what's going on, learning as you're in amongst it, with a view to seeing another church planted. And it's really exciting to hear what you guys are doing, to hear about the partnership. In a sense, there's a keenness and an availability that's been matched up. And we're really excited to see what God will do over the next couple of years, and possibly be a template for other churches to consider and replicate for the future.
Rhett, I've often heard you talk about different types of training. Can you talk through the different types of training?
Yeah. So typically churches will say we want to get training in the calendar. A certain department head will say let's get training in the calendar. And you've got to ask yourself, what kind of training are you meaning? And most people are thinking just one sort of training, but there's actually 4 sorts. Now, I grew up in what I'd call the generalist training of every kind of the laity or the volunteer, which was, you're trying to train some ministry of the pew, 2 ways to live, just for starters. I think it's fantastic, right? But there's another particular training that we might call discipleship training. We want to help people know their Bibles better, in the Word, growing in their godliness, godly character. So that's the discipleship one, the second one. The third one is ministry specific, where you're running a children's ministry and you want to train someone in classroom management or giving a talk to a 5-year-old, right? Ministry specific, or the sound desk, how to particularly manage the dials on the sound desk thing. So that's ministry specific, that's the third one. But the fourth one is a generic leadership training. And what we know is that actually, this is going to sound terrible, but whether you're leading BHP or the mafia or a pastor of a church, there's 5 generic things that leaders, intuitive leaders will do to make leadership sort of happen. And but by knowing those 5 things, even if you're just a leader in training, you can actually get better at that, work out where you're strong, where you're weak, put scaffolding around it, and grow that. But knowing the 4 is really helpful to know which kind of training we're talking about.
Yep, and knowing those 5 core competencies of leadership also helps you actually work out, well, where do I actually need to move someone so that I can actually move them into a different layer of leadership and actually see them take on more responsibility as well. You can actually work out how to intentionally develop them rather than just sort of throwing them in the deep end and
absolutely
sink or swim.
Yeah. So having frameworks, all these kind of paradigms in your head, diagnostic, is very helpful for knowing where they exist and how you train people well.
So to finish, Rhett, just want to hear your reflections. What would you say to an apprentice who's listening into this podcast?
All right. Make sure you give yourself to the classic things of godliness, but also add to that, how am I developing as a leader?
And for the church leader who's listening into this and thinking, well, what Rhett sort of envisages is just too big, there's too much there, where do I start? What do you want to say to them?
We'll just start small. The key thing is to set aside time to get into the important non-urgent work of training and multiplying yourself, and that's particularly try and work out how you're going to make leaders or build leaders, and that's just intentionally starting that.
Great. Well, Rhett, it's been great having you talk into this important topic of apprenticeships in church. Looking forward to seeing some of the things you do across the network over the next few years. Now, I just want to talk quickly about the Reach Australia development program. Over the course of the weekend, you were part of a consult team working with a local church. What did you find helpful, valuable about that experience as someone who's, looking on for the first time and experiencing a consult as an observer, consultant from the outside?
Oh, look, it's encouraging to see local fellowships really seeking to make mission work, right? and in very different contexts, right, than the one I'm in, with very different challenges. But still, there's godly people there, genuinely trying to make it all work, and yeah, they're doing good work.
Yeah, we want to keep coming alongside churches and as a network, helping them think how they can become healthy, evangelistic and multiplying. So if you're thinking about a consult or wanting someone to help you analyse, ask questions about where you're at now and where you could be in the future, go to reachaustralia.com.au and check out the consult page and find out how Reach Australia can work with you to see your church get healthy, evangelistic and multiplying.